Right boys, welcome to the 14th video on my channel. Today we're going to be ranking championship clubs to the 25-6 season by club size. When considering how big these clubs really are, we'll be factoring things like trophies, fan base size and loyalty, stadium size and history and legacy. At number 24, we've got Wrexham. Forget what the present and what the future might hold. For now, Wrexham are a very small club, but that obviously doesn't mean they will be in the future. Wrexham have never actually played in the championship before this season. For most of their 150 plus year history, they've either been in the third tier or the fourth tier, and they even spent 13 consecutive seasons in the National League from 2008 to 2021. It's safe to say the lack of historic second tier presence makes them a massive outlier. Small stadium, small town, small fan base, but like I say, considering everything that's going on at the moment, that is not to say Wrexham will still be a small club in the future. At number 23, we've got Oxford United. Much like Wrexham, most of their existence has been in the third and fourth tiers. They've had no top flight experience, which immediately puts them behind many teams in the Championship. The greatest achievement was winning the League Cup in 1986, a genuine highlight, but their only major honour. They've spent over a decade in non-league, stadium's way too small for the Championship, and the fan base is not great. At number 22, we've got Millwall. This is definitely going to surprise a few people. Despite Millwall's strong identity, loyal fan base, they massively lack historical success, top flight longevity, and honours that define bigger clubs. Millwall have never actually won a major domestic trophy, for example an FA Cup, League Cup or League title. They were FA Cup finalists once in 2004 when they lost to Manchester United. A few third and second tier title promotions, but nothing that competes with clubs that have won top divisions or even European trophies. The Den is also in the smaller side of stadiums when you compare it to other grounds in the league. Facilities are particularly modest when you compare them to the likes of Southampton, Leicester, Derby, West Brom, whose stadiums are 25 to 32k plus. And going back to history, Millwall have just 2 seasons in the top flight, which is almost less than any other championship club. And particularly when you consider most championship clubs have at least 10, 20 or even 40 plus seasons in the top division. Millwall are heavily clinging on to their fan base right now. At number 21, we've got Bristol City. While Bristol City are a well-run club with growing fan base and a modern infrastructure, they lack the historical honours, top flight pedigree and national stature that define the biggest sides in the division. At number 20, we've got Charlton. Charlton's history is far better than the likes of Bristol City and Millwall, but even so, when you compare it to most of the teams in the Championship, it's pretty crap. They have one major honour in the FA Cup, albeit it was over 75 years ago, but a trophy's a trophy. They've had 26 seasons in the top flight, which at first glance may seem decent, but it's significantly less when you compare it to a lot of teams in this league. With that being said though, the Valley is quite a big stadium, and it's definitely up there in the Championship in terms of the biggest grounds, but their attendances aren't great. At number 19, we've got QPR. A classic London club, rich in character, but not quite rich in honours. QPR have been around since the late 1800s, and yes, they've had their moments. A runner-up finish in the old First Division in 1976, a League Cup win back in 1967, and the occasional trip to the Premier League. But while the club has a strong London identity and a loyal core fan base, the truth is, they've never really broken into the elite. Pathetically small stadium too. Okay, maybe that is a bit too hard. At number 18, we've got Hull. Like a lot of these teams already mentioned, Hull have had a taste of top-flight football, but the long-term history, honours list, and sustained success simply don't match up with the majority of the clubs above them. The problem is though, Hull have never won a domestic trophy. They were FA Cup finalists in 2014 but lost to Arsenal in extra time. A few promotions to the Premier League but no trophies, not even a League Cup or second division title. And even saying that, they've only had 5 seasons in the top flight. Forget how poorly Hull are run as a club though, and just focus on the investment they've had over the years. They've got a feel of a bigger club than the teams I've just mentioned. They've also got a more modern stadium, the fan turnouts are decent, but saying that, I might have had a howler here. At number 17, we've got Swansea City. Average attendances of around 16 to 18,000 fans at home. Not bad, but it puts Swansea in the bottom half of the Championship. Yes, they had that magical Premier League run and even won a League Cup in 2013. But apart from that, what else really is there? To be fair to Swansea though, they've spent most of their time in the second tier, spending 45 seasons in the Championship or Division 2. But because this is the Championship and arguably the second best division in the world, Swansea are unfortunately competing with a lot of teams who have spent most of their time in the Premier League / Division 1. But yeah, at number 16 we've got I really need to stop doing that now. The Hornets first joined the Football League in 1920, spending most of the 20th century in the third and fourth tiers. Nothing flashy, just a small local club doing its thing. Until we said hello to the Elton John era between 1976 and 1987. Yes, that Elton John. Elton John was a lifelong Watford fan, bought the club and became chairman in the late 70s, appointed Graham Taylor as manager, and what happened next was quite literally unreal. 4 promotions in 6 years, from 4th division to 1st division by 1982. 1983 finished second in the top flight, behind only Liverpool. 1984 reached the FA Cup final, just losing to Everton, and ever since then, they've sort of become a yo-yo club between the Premiership and the Championship, which is probably what most people know them to be. But they're staying 16th. At number 15, we've got Coventry. Former top flight regular, FA Cup winner, and Premier League founding member, but still 15th. Finances. Coventry's financial position has been shaky for years. We're talking administration, ownership disputes, playing home games in Birmingham. It's been chaos behind the scenes. Coventry have a loyal fan base, but not a particularly big one, which I guess you can't really slate them for considering what's been going on behind the club. I'd say Coventry's global pull is much smaller than the likes of Leicester, Southampton, or even Middlesbrough. Coventry were in League 2 as recently as 2018, but that was only a season. It's safe to say they've had 34 seasons in the first tier and 51 in the second tier, with only 15 in the third tier. So going off that, Coventry at the very least are an established championship club. So why am I being too harsh? This list is honestly so hard. At number 14, we've got PNE. Bigger than Coventry. You must be having a laugh, mate. But let's explain. Preston are one of the original Football League clubs founded in 1880. First ever league champions in 1988-89 season, and went the whole season unbeaten. And then went on to win another First Division title the season after. They're also 2 times FA Cup winners, albeit it was ages ago. Preston have also spent more seasons in the top flight than Coventry have. Football isn't just about who had the best season last year, it's about what the badge means, and Preston's badge carries 145 plus years of tradition. And when people talk about proper football clubs, Preston always gets a mention. Number 13, we've got Stoke. A club once known for being tough to beat on a rainy night, now sitting in mid-table, not just on the pitch, but in stature too. Now, if we're being real here, Stoke are one of the richest clubs in the EFL. They're owned by Bet365, one of the wealthiest ownership groups. On paper, they've got Premier League level backing, but financial fair play rules mean they can't just throw money around like they used to. There's still a massive stigma around Stoke City being a big spending club, but they still can't get back into the Prem. Stoke spent 10 consecutive seasons in the Premier League from 2008 to 2018, and they weren't just there to make up numbers under Tony Pulis. They reached an FA Cup final in 2011, qualified for Europe, and are known for that insane team that still managed to get relegated. Now, moving on to the fan base, Stoke fans are loyal, and the club has solid support both home and away. But Stoke's global reach isn't massive, and by way of major trophies, they've only really won the League Cup, which is in 1972. A bit like Preston, Stoke are one of the original 12 members of the Football League, and while they've won far less than Preston have, I just think they're more of a dirty team, if that makes sense. They've got more of an impact on Championship teams or even Premier League teams. Really hard to explain, but they're just a nastier team in general. Oh, and they've got a far better stadium and better fans, so we'll just cling on to that. On number 12, we've got Birmingham City. Big enough to be noticed, but not quite big enough to dominate. Otherwise known as the most average-sized football club in the Championship. Blues are one of the longest serving clubs in the division and nearly always near the middle, so there can be no one other for the 12th spot. Birmingham's history is respectable but not spectacular. Founded in 1875, long history, strong roots. Spent a fair chunk of their life in the top 2 divisions. Won 2 League Cups in 1963 and 2011, but no league titles or deep European legacy. A recent Premier League spell between 2002 and 2011, solid but short-lived. Again, pretty average. They're a big club in Birmingham but will always be second to Villa. Loyal core support, strong local following but not a global brand, and an average-sized ground for the Championship. At number 11, we've got Norwich City. Carrow Road, a capacity of around 27,000, consistently high home attendances of around 24 to 26k a week, which puts them in top 8 or so for attendance in the Championship. Not the biggest, but solidly upper middle tier. Norwich have got a self-sustaining, well-run model, no billionaire backers, but solid commercial footing. Seen as a yo-yo club between the Championship and the Prem, never won a major domestic trophy, but they played over 25 seasons in the top flight. Best ever finish was 3rd in the Premier League in the 1992-93 season, even playing in the UEFA Cup that year. Not a sleeping giant, but not small time either. At number 10, we've got Southampton. Not the biggest, not the smallest. A Premier League regular literally last season, now sitting mid-pack in the Championship pecking order. Founded in 1885, Southampton spent over 40 seasons in the top flight. Best ever finish being 2nd in the First Division in 1983-4 season. Won the FA Cup in 1976, runners-up in 2003. Strong local fan base, especially dominant along the south coast. One of the biggest stadiums in the league. They've got all of that, but they're not quite a sleeping giant similar to Norwich, or a historical powerhouse for that matter. That's why Southampton, as of now, sit as the 10th biggest club in the Championship. At number 9, we've got Pompey. Despite Fradson Park being smaller than most top Championship grounds, Pompey fans are in and amongst the best fans in the league. Pompey have 2 FA Cups and 2-time First Division champions. They played in Europe as recently as 2009, and they've got more top-level silverware than half the clubs in this division. Portsmouth may have been in League 1 or League 2 recently, but their size never matched the level. They've lifted league titles, FA Cups, they've played in Europe, survived financial meltdown, and the fans never walked away. And for me, that's why Pompey are the 9th biggest club in the Championship and maybe the most underrated. On number 8, we've got Derby County. Derby County rank is the 8th biggest club in the Championship because they combine strong history, a loyal fan base, a big stadium, and a solid footballing identity. But the truth is, they fall just short of the truly massive clubs in the division due to recent financial struggles, time spent in League 1, and limited modern top-flight success. They are 2-time First Division champions though, FA Cup winners, and were a regular top-flight side in the 1970s and 80s. They do infamously hold hold the record for the lowest Premier League points total. I've just made that sound like a good thing, but all things considered, the name still carries weight. At number 7, we've got Middlesbrough. Not quite a giant, but not quite a mid-table team either. The Riverside being one of the biggest stadiums in the Championship, an average attendances of 22 to 27k, comfortably top 10 in the league. Middlesbrough won the League Cup in 2004, but what stands out to me, Middlesbrough didn't just only play in the UEFA Cup in 2006, they got to the final. This is something 75% of Premier League teams will never go on to do, even beating the likes of Roma and FC Basel. They lost in the final to Seville, but this remains one of the greatest in the club's history. Adding to this, Middlesbrough is a one-club town in the heart of Teesside, and a club with a real strong identity. And they've had 61 total top-flight seasons, which I find mental. At number 6, we've got Sheffield United. They're historic, they're passionate, and they've been bouncing between the Premier League and the Championship for decades. Bramall Lane, one of the oldest professional football stadiums in the world. A big ground, big crowds, Bramall Lane brings big club energy. Sheffield United were First Division champions in 1898, 4-time FA Cup winners, and over 60 seasons in the top flight. At number 5, we've got West Brom. They've lifted trophies, they've battled giants, and they've been part of the English football since the very beginning. Founded in 1878, one of the oldest clubs in England and a founding member of the Football League. Over 80 seasons in the top flight, 5-time FA Cup winners, First Division champions in 1920, and made several European football appearances in the 70s and 80s. That's not just history, that's silverware, legends, and serious heritage. West Brom have a massive identity, especially in the Black Country. Fierce rivalries with Wolves, Villa and Birmingham, consistently solid away followings even in the Championship, and you don't go toe-to-toe with Villa, Wolves and Blues for a century unless you're big time. Number 4, we've got Blackburn Rovers. Founded in 1875, one of the oldest football clubs in the world. English First Division champions in 1912 and 1914, one of only 5 clubs to have ever won the Premier League, which Rovers won in the 1994-95 season. They've won the FA Cup on 6 occasions, they've lifted the biggest prize in English football, they've helped build the Football League itself, and they're still fighting to get back to where they belong. Listen, they might not shout the loudest, but by every major measure, trophies, history, identity, Blackburn are easily a top 4 club in the Championship. Now moving on to the top 3 biggest clubs in the Championship this season, and at number 3, we've got Leicester City. They've defied the odds, they've conquered England, and they've shown the world what belief looks like. King Power Stadium being one of the biggest grounds in the league, they've got the facilities, the fan base, and the setup of a Premier League club. Premier League champions, FA Cup winners, 3-time League Cup winners, Conference League semi-finalists in the 21-22 season, and they even got to the quarter-finals of the Champions League in the 2016-17 season. Fan base exploded in size post-2016, and they've now got a massive global pull. Backed by wealthy Thai owners, King Power, and a state-of-the-art training facility, arguably the best outside the Premier League. Spent big in recent seasons, definitely one of the richest clubs in the Championship. Leeds aren't just big, they're Premier League level big in terms of infrastructure. Okay, they don't have the raw size of former Championship sides like Leeds or Sunderland, but Leicester's recent success, global profile, and Premier League level pedigree put them firmly in the top 3. So by process of elimination, we're left with Ipswich and Sheffield Wednesday. Who's it going to be? At number 2, we've got Sheffield Wednesday. Before many clubs even existed, Wednesday were already playing competitive matches in the north of England. One of the oldest professional football clubs in the world, based in Sheffield, a city with football in its DNA. Sheffield Wednesday, a team that's had over 66 seasons in the top flight, a founding member of the Premier League, 4 First Division titles, 3 FA Cups and 1 League Cup. Wednesday have participated in the UEFA Cup a number of times. Yes, they haven't been in the Premier League since 2000, but they've remained one of the most well-supported clubs in every division. They've got a massive stadium, and for me, the best set of fans in the league. And overall, I personally think they're a far bigger club than the rest of the teams I've just mentioned. So that leaves us with Ipswich Town being the biggest club in the Championship this season. Ipswich Town are one of only 6 English clubs to have won a European competition. That's a level of success that no other Championship club this season can claim. Only 26 top flight seasons, but in that they've got 1 First Division title and an FA Cup. Portman Road, not the biggest in the Championship, but it's a historical, traditional English ground. And even though they were relegated last season, Ipswich fans still sell out pretty much every week. Yes, Ipswich are heavily clinging on the Bobby Robson era European nights and the European title, but the plain truth is no other team in this league has ever come close to winning a European title, and neither have most Premier League teams. But anyway, yeah boys, I'm going to wrap up the video there. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments how you'd rearrange any of the teams. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. But yeah, see you in the next one.